Welcome back. We just have a couple more people coming in right now, so we'll give it a couple minutes before we start. I think they're just making their way over from the last presentation. All right, I think we're just about ready to get started then. So welcome back everyone again to the last but not least session for today. So here we have Brianna Keaton and Matthew Dunnigan, and they are part of the NIRSA Assembly, and they're going to be here today to talk to you about the future of campus recreation. Just again, same rules as before. Just keep your chat unless the presenters want you to engage with them by asking questions. And again, we encourage you to keep your cameras on because it's great for the presenters to have a face to a name. And other than that, we are also recording this as well. So you will get this on our YouTube page after the presentation. So that being said, you two can take it away.
All right, Ross, thank you so much. As Ross said, I'm Matt Dunnigan. I am a senior coordinator here at UC Riverside. I'm pretty excited to be here presenting to, as Ross indicated, the future of what we're doing here in the NIRSA Assembly, especially with the student lead on. It's great to just kind of sit down with some of the students. I once was on the other side of the conversation, sitting like a student in my undergraduate career. So doing the student lead on is something that I always try to do to get back and kind of connect with the students. And then I'm also going to give an opportunity for my co-host to introduce herself. She actually does all the work. I'm just kind of here as a talking head.
Uh-oh. Okay, sorry about that. How's it going, everyone? My name's Brianna Keaton. I'm actually the fitness coordinator for Red Rocks Community College. I'm going to be transitioning here very soon, but I am excited to be here. As Matt mentioned, giving back to the students is something that's really important for us since we've been in your shoes and we've kind of been on that opposite end of being involved in NIRSA. And so we're really excited to be able to present to you the assembly today and all that entails.
All right, sweet. So as Ross said, obviously we got some community guidelines that we're going to kind of attempt to go through pretty quickly. Obviously, we're encouraging all students to be open, creative ideas. NIRSA Assembly is going to be one of the things that we talk a lot about in this, but it's also kind of an education, I think, to what NIRSA, kind of the nuts and bolts goes into things that run and govern our association. And I think it's important for students like yourselves to kind of understand the opportunities that y'all have, this being one of them. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question. There's two presenters plus Ross also is in the chat. So if y'all have a question about something, feel free to stop us. This is definitely, as much as that is a presentation, it's a conversation about what we're doing in NIRSA and how y'all can get involved, most importantly. Besides that, obviously, be mindful of each other. Just because someone's ideas are different doesn't mean that we got to get on them or anything like that. Ross also indicated that it is going to be recorded. So the first thing, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Does anyone know, I guess this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what goes on with NIRSA, but has anyone ever talked about like the NIRSA board, NIRSA member network, NIRSA foundation? Does anyone know what those are? It's okay if you guys can either unmute yourself or you can chat, and it's okay. Science, you're going to learn about them regardless. So I just want to see if anyone had any insight into them.
This is my very first NIRSA conference, so I have never heard of anything before today.
Okay. How do you say your name?
Leora.
Leora. Well, welcome first off to NIRSA. Welcome to the Student Lead On. We're going to try to cover everything as we go through. And so please, like I said, please stop and ask us questions. So this is obviously kind of one of the diagrams that we're given within our committees as we go out to educate people, young recreational professionals about what NIRSA does. So there's obviously NIRSA team headquarters. This is, if for those of you that don't know, NIRSA is located, like the headquarters is in Corvallis, Oregon. There's an actual building that you can go to. People take picture at the front with the huge NIRSA logo and everything. And that team basically does a lot of the groundwork for hosting the conferences, kind of putting these committees together, and kind of is the nuts and bolts for us as committees. I'm going to go around the other way and talk about the NIRSA Foundation Board, but I also want to kind of look at something else as far as ways to get involved and things that if you have any questions, a place that you can go and actually find all this stuff. So this is the NIRSA website. Hopefully everyone can see that, right? You can see me scrolling up. All right, cool. So this is kind of the NIRSA, this is the NIRSA, not kind of, this is the NIRSA website. So you can go on to obviously NIRSA.net and it'll kind of give you to the landing page, but you're going to want to go to the lead and then get involved. So all these things obviously become a leader in collegiate recreation are great, but these are all the leadership opportunities. Most of them are for professional staff members, but there are some that are directed for students, incoming undergraduates or graduate assistants. But I just want to scroll really quickly on all the opportunities that are possible with applications that are going to be coming up. So I'm going to start on this side of the page and you guys can see how big this toolbar is. So I'm going to start scrolling. Those are a lot of opportunities, right? So, but the best way to kind of do is I always scroll all the way down to the bottom and start looking at, shout out NIRSA Assembly, first one on the board, right? But I want to go start looking at some of the other areas just to kind of understand what we do. So the first one that we were talking about was the NIRSA Foundation Board. So supporting the future of recreational sports. So you can kind of read what they actually do. If you're interested in applying, obviously clicking on the right side of this and it'll obviously take you to an application page. It also gives you the deadline when to apply is. So obviously I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the next slide on this. So I'm not going to talk about the NIRSA Assembly and our registration deadline, but I want to just make sure that everyone understands that this landing page is the best way to kind of understand what goes on with NIRSA as far as the committees that we can work on, the editorial boards and everything that we have. So that's like the NIRSA Foundation. That's the purple one, if you don't remember on our little wheel. And obviously we talk about the NIRSA Service Corporation Board, which is also a portion of the wheel that I'll go back to in a little bit. But obviously this is obviously more so supporting the vision and mission of NIRSA through enterprise. And it's a corporation, obviously subsidiary of NIRSA, formed in 1999, and you can read on as much as you want, but also another opportunity. And then obviously we do have the board of directors, which is a little bit different. Let me see if I get out of this because it does fit into our overall scheme that we were talking about. But obviously the NIRSA board is more directed towards longtime professional staff members, but also like I said, NIRSA member network is something that we can talk about. And if y'all have questions about that, I was actually a part of the NIRSA member network a long time ago, back in 2010, I think, or 11, it's been ages. But you can serve as a student representative for a region. And if you don't know what regions are, I know I'm talking to a lot of the students, and this might be a lot of information, but you can find all this stuff on the NIRSA website. I'm going to try to push as much as I can onto the NIRSA website, so then that way we can kind of understand. But what the NIRSA member network does is basically we have 6 regions plus Canada now, and they all have representatives. They have a student representative that serves a 1-year term, then they have a professional that serves a 2-year term. And each region has one of those, and then plus we have a national student leader, and then also a representative for the member network that serves on the board. And so the NIRSA member network does a lot of other cool things as far as doing other items like hosting regional conferences, the virtual conferences. The student lead-on is something that's ran by mostly all students, and there's a couple of professional staff members. So Ross and his team that are putting on the region 5, 6 in Canada student lead-on this entire week. We're part of the NIRSA network in some way, shape, or form, and I want to give kudos to them because they're putting on a pretty good programming on day one. So shout out to Ross and his team. So the other thing that we're going to talk about is that big arrow, NIRSA Assembly. So the NIRSA Assembly, myself and Bree are actually in our first year, but also it's kind of just a more of forward-thinking group that focuses not on hot topics, or focus on hot topics, and then affecting the profession of collegiate recreation right now and will continue in the future. So one of the cool things that we do is the composition of our actual assembly is something that we can look at and kind of break down a little bit more, because one of the cool things about the NIRSA Assembly is that we have a lot of different types of students that work, and a lot of people that work on our committee. And one of the things that I always tell students as they go through this entire process to try to figure out what they want to do is, how do I get involved? NIRSA Assembly is a great way to get involved. Our roster, you can find at nirsa.net/nirsa/assembly/roster. And it has a full roster of who sits on this committee. The convener obviously is Shelby Smith, and then board of director representative, past president's representative, the NIRSA member board. And then we also have NIRSA members that actually just work and actually have to apply to be on there. And then as we scroll down, you can kind of see that we do have professional members less than 5 years. We have open seats. But then the best part about it is that we do have student members that we have three student members that actually sit on our panel to kind of sit in and have these discussions that we have on topics that Brianna is actually going to talk about. But it's also a great way for the students to get involved and sit on these committees, just to kind of see what we're doing and what we're going to be hopefully doing in the future. All right, and then let's see. All right, cool. So some of the things that we obviously talk about in the NIRSA Assembly is, it's kind of more of a brainstorming opportunity for us. We talk about current and emerging topics, issues in collegiate recreation, and how we're going to be affected, and kind of hammer out like a path, so that way we can kind of have strategic planning for us. We do consider things that go on from anywhere between 3 to 5 years, 10 years. One of the hot topics that we've talked about a lot includes all of the students that we don't have or aren't working. I got to, before this, I was talking to Ross about whether he's open or not. And that's very important, because for Ross, it means that he still has to recruit students. He still has to hire students and all that stuff, versus me, where we haven't been open since March here in California. So I don't have a student staff. So recruiting for me in the next year is going to be very, very big. And that's one of the biggest topics at the NIRSA Assembly we've talked about. And it is not one of the 3 topics that we brought up, but it is a portion of it and kind of goes into it. So we do have, and within the NIRSA Assembly, we actually break up into work team discussions. We have meetings. Brianna hosted a small work team discussion on Monday, where we got to actually dive into some of the issues, breakout sessions. It's pretty cool, because then a lot of the things that we talk about in the NIRSA Assembly end up making its way onto some of the work team items, as far as it goes to actual tangible programming that comes out for NIRSA. And then also we talk about research and thinking. So we want to make sure that when we're doing this work, that we're actually doing it with a very intentional, and it's things that are actually going to benefit not only the profession, but also the members that we have. Sharing with members, obviously. So some of the ideas that have emerged from our initial assembly, we actually get signed on for an entire year. So we started, I want to say in April, or maybe late March, April. And we sat down and talked about some of the issues that were coming up, and through the meetings that we have monthly meetings, but then also we have bi-weekly work team meetings. These were some of the topics that were brought up, was, shifting populations, justifying costs of GAs, which is important for you all, because some graduate assistants aren't going to be, positions aren't going to be there next year, or you might be looking for a graduate assistant position. So how to figure out that. how to move and all those things. Those are pretty big, important things for undergraduates to understand, especially if they're going to go into the field of recreation. Obviously, esports, it's kind of crossed out, but that was one of the big things that we wanted to tackle. But you can also see in some of the work groups, the NIRSA Championship Series has a work team that is, dedicated to esports. We talked about collaborations, impact and retention, shifting college population, how many students are off campus, how does that affect campus recreation? And then keeping campus recreation as an essential function on campus is something that we talked about, because a lot of professional staff are kind of looking and saying, okay, well, all these budgets are coming out and we're getting a lot of budget cuts. How can I effectively still run my business or run the rec center and still have to do other things and wear other hats and be active on campus and still make sure that I'm doing social justice and educational sessions for my students? How do I do that? So that's something that we want to tackle, and actually one of the topics that I get to work on this year. And then some other things, obviously integrated wellness. We talked about COVID and the effects of COVID, health, mental health benefits, and everything like that. So it's pretty robust topic list. So from this robust topic list, we actually kind of got down to some topics from 2019, 2020. And Bree stopped me because I forgot where we split the presentation. I want to say it's either this one or the next one, right?
Yeah, you're good. This is your slide. You're good.
All right, cool.
Oh, real
So
quick, before you go over this one, Matt,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
wanted to make a note on the last slide. The reason why esports is actually crossed out is because we've spent a lot of time on that topic, and we actually have formalized a plan as a profession to move that forward. And so most institutions at this point are really starting to look into esport programming, or you may already have one at your institution. So that's part of the reason why that's kind of marked out, is because we've done a fairly good job at finding resources and program opportunities for esports. Now's the time to kind of focus on some of the other realms that are on this slide here.
Told you guys, she does all the heavy lifting. I'm just the talking head. Okay, so we're almost through that. So last year's topics, we talked a lot about Gen Z and beyond. What does this generation look like? What will the impact on campus recreation be? How do we integrate what's going on now with recruiting students into our profession and keeping them in our profession? I had a conversation with someone the other day, and I figured out this is my 15th year in recreational sports in some way, as a student, in undergrad, all the way to being professional. So it's kind of one of the biggest things. How do we impact the profession as Generation Z, I guess you could say. Biggest topic, obviously, Bree talked a little bit about this, virtual well-being. How do we approach the physical, psychological, and social well-being of students in an online capacity? That is a huge topic across any higher education that you can think of. And it's something that we dived into last year. And it kind of rolled into this year with some of the topics that we did for the 2020-2021 year. And then future implications of current political issues. That's also a big, something big that the NIRSA Assembly was talking about last year. They wanted to talk about what's the impact of that in campus recreation, people going to school, depending on, who was president and what was going on in the world. What are those impacts on campus? And so it's something we want to be obviously supportive of everyone's views and everything, but how do we do that as an association? How do we program for that? How do we prepare for all those things? And so it's actually a lot of stuff that comes up that's great conversations, and it also kind of prepares you to have these conversations on your campus if they're not being had. And we'll talk about that with topic number 1, which is the best topic, I think. So without further ado, Bree, you're up.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And don't let him fool you, ladies and gentlemen, and he actually is the one who put all this stuff together. So he's amazing. I'm just the talking head. But as Matt mentioned, you all are very fortunate to be here and to be involved with NIRSA. And I say that because I didn't get involved with NIRSA until I became a grad assistant. And I wish that I would have had an opportunity to be a part of Student Lead On. And so again, as mentioned before, really encouraging you all to take note of some of these opportunities that you have to become more involved within the profession, the NIRSA Assembly being one of them. So I'm going to get off my high horse here, but to talk about some of the topics that we're reviewing for the 2020-2021 Assembly year. The very first one being social justice and anti-racism work as it relates to higher education and collegiate recreation. So this is really important, as Matt mentioned before. In the last Assembly year, we talked about political issues and how that kind of affects students and their overall learning experience. And so I'm happy that we were able to kind of draw from that particular topic and really continue on with the work of social justice. So with some of the things that we're working on in this particular topic group, one of the things that we ask ourselves is, what is the role of campus rec or collegiate rec in furthering anti-racism and racial equality on campuses? We know that this is a huge issue, not just at our institutions or in our communities, but as a country. We are struggling with this. And so this is a huge thing that we need to jump into. I know oftentimes there may be the question of, does campus recreation have a place in all of that? Is it our duty to talk about that, or is it someone else's? And quite frankly, this, in my opinion, is the work of everyone. It doesn't matter what field you're in. This is basic human rights that we're talking about, and humanity. And so we want to make sure that we, as a facet in higher education, we want to make sure that we are also preparing students in this realm and getting them the knowledge and understanding and resources for social justice and anti-racism work on campus. So I'm going to actually stop talking for a bit, because this is actually the group that Matt is in. And so he can kind of chime in a little bit on some of the things that they are working on in this group, and where they are heading right now as far as some resources and programming that may potentially come out of this topic area.
Yeah, so thanks, Bree. And this is also kind of one of those topics that's obviously hot button topic. Obviously one of those things that's kind of low hanging fruit. Everyone wants this type of information. And so currently within this work team for the topic number one, we're looking at providing some type of educational forums, kind of a roadmap on how to dive into programming, how to educate students, how to educate professional staff members, no matter where you are on that spectrum of being able to talk about social justice, equity, inclusion, all those things, those EDI terms, right? And so part of the work team that we're looking at right now is we are trying to make sure that we're providing not only educational pieces, but being able to say, hey, this is, if you feel like you need to have a diversity committee in your rec center, use these tools to probably maybe formulate that. Or if you want to host a programming for your students, who are the people on campus that you need to initiate these conversations with? Or if you don't have anyone on your campus because maybe their position got cut, what's the next step to kind of have these diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations within your rec center if you don't have them? There's a multitude of variances when you go into campus recreation, because there's some universities that do very well with EDI terminologies, education of their students. They have a diversity committee within their campus recreation program that works with the EDI on campus. And then there's others that they don't have anything. They don't have a diversity committee. They just kind of do the one time over of the at the staff meeting at the beginning of the year, and that's your diversity training for everything. And I don't think that it's proper for us to say that it's not a checkbox item anymore. We can't just do it at the beginning of the year and then think about, okay, we're good. So within this work team, we're looking to try to hit those milestones for individuals, whether it's your first time talking about social justice or it's your 25th time talking about social justice and leading these discussions. We want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for growth for anyone that might want to have these conversations. One of the biggest things that came out was the NIRSA 21-day challenge. I did that. Even for me, that was a lot of information. That was 21 days worth of 5 or 6 articles plus discussions on Fridays. How do we take that information and actually put it into action? And like Bree said, one of the biggest things that my work team is divulging in is what's our role in it. We don't want to be the people that are doing everything, but at the same time, is what we're doing right now enough?
Absolutely. And so, I mean, as Matt mentioned, this is probably one of the biggest focal points of the assembly year. And we want to continue on with that, even as we get to the last bullet point here and how it says, what will the evolution of programming look like, for example? I know at Red Rocks, one of the things that I like to focus on is cultural wellness. And so putting together programs that focuses on celebrating the different, diverse students that we have, different ethnicities that are on campus. So for example, one of the events that we host for Black History Month is Rhythm in Motion. And so we invite community members who teach African dance. We have a student group on campus that does African drumming already. So kind of connecting with them, bringing them in addition to working with other entities off campus, like we have an African grill out here, and they cater for the event. So it's an opportunity for all students to come together and to learn more about the African and African American history, as well as some of the cultural traditions and influences that are a part of that. We do the same thing with National Hispanic Heritage Month, in which we celebrate through a event called Salsa and Salsa, excuse me. And so Salsa and Salsa, we bring in a dance instructor who teaches students about salsa, the history of it, in addition to how to do the dance. So there's that physical element of physical wellness. And then we jump into salsa, the other side, which is how to make a healthy salsa. And so we're diving into the traditional pieces of this community and of this culture. So again, great work that's coming out of this topic. And I look forward to seeing what else Matt and his work group are going to come up with. Cool. So topic number 2, this work group is focused on the response and navigation during different disruptors. One of the biggest disruptors that we're going through this year is COVID-19 and the whole pandemic. And so that's essentially where this came from. And we really just want to understand how can collegiate recreation and NIRSA in general provide the resources necessary for institutions, staff, and students to continue to be successful during these disruptors. So obviously, we don't want to come across an issue like this again, but if it were to happen, we want to make sure that we're prepared for it. And so that's what this work group is working on, looking at the lasting impacts of COVID. What have we learned from this pandemic, and how can we continue that moving forward as far as those resources and programming? We also want to look at, in the face of different disruptors, how can collegiate recreation maintain its position within the institutions as a critical component of the student learning experience. So we're always having to explain our why in campus rec. Everyone, especially when you're involved in this profession, they often have this mindset that we're just a facility with dumbbells and treadmills. And it's so much more than that. So constantly explaining our whys, especially during disruptors, because when this happens, whether it's budget cuts, loss of grant money for the institution, we're usually the first one or first department that's looked at as far as making cuts. So how do we continue to explain our why, provide those different opportunities to the staff and students so that we can progress the profession forward? So this is an excellent group as well. Okay, and then the last one, this is the group that I am actually a part of, and we focus on the sustainability of collegiate recreation within higher ed. Now, this one was a very difficult topic because it has so many different facets to it. And so we really tried to make it as specific as possible and kind of get it out of that general state that it was in. But overall, we're focused on how do we keep campus rec sustainable? How do we stay engaged and on top of the ever-changing generations and the different culture shifts? How do we stay relevant in all that we do, whether that's through professional development, helping students to get the experience that they need so that they can move forward in this profession and also be successful? So we're looking at those different strategies, kind of tying in a little bit of funding and budget cuts. What might that look like, and how can we be sustainable in those areas or with some of those issues? How do we remain sustainable from a why standpoint? How do we express our purpose? And I think sometimes we struggle with that, but some of the things that we've been coming up with is remembering to tell the student story. Sometimes we are so focused on collecting data that we look at our students as numerical data rather than just people. And so we need to get into a habit of telling both the student story as well as connecting it with that data. So those are just some things that we have come up with thus far to try to explain our purpose and our why diversify and continue to be sustainable in this profession. So I'm really excited about this group. As Matt mentioned, we just did an Ideas in Motion focus group in which we reached out to other members in NIRSA to kind of pick their brains. We don't necessarily want to come up with all the ideas in a 6-person group. We want to engage the membership as a whole to figure out what are some other areas that we can improve upon and what are some resources that they may be looking for. So as we mentioned before, these are the 3 topics that we're focusing on for this particular assembly year. Some great things are coming out of this, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity or have the opportunity to sit in on the NIRSA Assembly. And hopefully this will kind of reinvigorate you all to be thinking about serving in the future. And so that kind of leads us into our next slide here. Okay, so the reporting out, and Matt, did you want to kind of go over this? I mean, this is ultimately, you know, when we gather this information in our work groups, we report this out to the NIRSA Board of Directors. And from there, they will kind of approve, you know, our programs and resources that we have brought forth to that board. And so that's essentially how we do it. We do try to work with others within the overall membership so that we can pick your brains and get some good insight from you prior to presenting a more finalized approach to the national board. And so that's essentially how we go about doing this. And that, you know, if it helps, think back to the wheel that Matt had on the first few slides there to kind of let you know how that approach goes. And so the NIRSA board is on there, and that's essentially who the assembly reaches out to.
Yeah, you did. I think you hit the nail on the head with how everything works within NIRSA. The only thing that I would add is that a lot of the stuff, when we do have these ideas and motions and opportunities for students and individuals to actually speak, it's not so much that we're just doing it just because we have to do it. We want to actually physically hear what's going on from one side, from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast and including Canada now, because things are so different. And I like interacting like with, I use Ross as an example because Ross and I were talking before this, and just hearing what he's going through in Canada with reopening. How does he run his facility? What's going on with his students? All those little small things are great indicators for me, because I can take this stuff and say, well, Ross, you know, up at Western in Ontario, or no, London, Canada, right? You said, and this is what he's doing. And so this is the ideology that they might be doing. So I can actually reach out to Ross and say, hey, Ross, can you send me some of this stuff? And it might be one of those things that we get to jam all this information together and come out with the best scenario for everyone. And that way it's almost like a resource. Now I can go and say, hey, the NIRSA Assembly was thinking about this. We're doing this. These are the ideas that we're getting from people across the country when they're reopening. And then we can actually put that into a wheel and see where it goes. And then actually it gets distributed to other work teams. And that way, those work teams like the NIRSA Member Network, NIRSA Championship Series that puts on all of the flag football and basketball tournaments and tennis tournaments that you see, soccer tournaments, that might be something that might come out from the NIRSA Assembly. So whenever we're in these meetings, we really are looking for y'all's honest opinion, because it's going to be something that's going to hopefully change for the better in the future. All right, so the next item that we're going to talk about was just some final thoughts. I know that that's a lot of information, a lot about NIRSA specifically, 32 minutes worth, 31 minutes if you count what time we started. But we do want to kind of put it back into a conversation mode. I love opening up the floor for people to ask questions. If you have anything from this that sparked your interest, this is a perfect way. Like I said, I'll get to the application process, but what is something like, how can we challenge the current thinking of members? I know that most of y'all are probably 1 year or less as NIRSA members, or hopefully more than 1 year. But do you think that these topics would impact your future? Is this your current thinking, or is it something way different? Are we like way off base on this? Okay, cool. So go ahead, Russ. I saw you.
I was gonna say, I definitely think the 3 topics, like the main projects you guys were talking about, definitely hits right on the head of the nail there, because especially with the social justice lately, with everything going on politically And with COVID being at the forefront of most of our issues right now, I think those two especially are present. And the sustainability, I think, has also always been a bit of a factor when looking at higher ed and how to keep higher ed education kind of still in the mix of things with campus recreation. I know here in Canada specifically, it doesn't work the same way with getting a GA ship, and it doesn't work at all with, you know, if you want to do campus recreation in a higher ed setting, there's not a campus recreation program that you go for. It kind of just evolves from other programs and other interests. So I really think that's an important area to look at for the future. For students.
Very, very good points, because I shared this with Ross earlier, is that a lot, I would say probably 95% of rec professionals don't go to school to be a rec professional. I think that's one of the things that we talk about a lot. I got both my degrees in public health, but obviously one of them was sponsored in the graduate assistant route. But it's something that us as Assembly kind of had to be aware of, just because students don't go and they say, okay, you know, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer or something like that. But, you know, there's something that brings people back into campus recreation, just because for the simple fact that we love what we're doing. Obviously, when we get back to the normal of having in-person events and things like that, that kind of is what draws us back, as well as doing work like this. The reason why I love recreation programming and everything is because it's not just like, as Bree said, it's not rolling out the balls out there and say, all right, everyone play 5 games, report your score back, or hey, there's a dumbbell set over here, or treadmill, whatever. It's a lot more than just that. It's a lot more inviting to have these conversations. And I'm thankful that we can have these conversations on these calls and get to know each other a little bit more, because then that leads us to a little bit of more growth, because then I'm more, I have a little bit more tools in my tool belt when I go to talk to these conversations, like with family members and things like that. It's something kind of inviting. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. So you might be asking yourself, like, okay, all this topic stuff and everything sounds great. How do I get involved? How do I get to the point where I can actually apply and be involved in NIRSA? There's a lot of times, especially with young undergraduate students that are looking for graduate assistant positions, or even GAs, graduate assistants that are looking for their first professional gig outside their schooling, and they want to go into the field of recreation. How do I get involved? That's one of the biggest questions that gets asked. I always tell people to go on to NIRSA Connect. Ideas in Motion is really good. That's the series, educational series that NIRSA puts on. Panels and presentations, if you feel comfortable presenting, or if you go to some of these panels and just kind of interacting with people is great. And then obviously I'll talk about the Assembly roster and everything like that. But it's kind of one of those things that a lot of undergraduate students always ask me, like, what's the best way to get hired? I was like, there's nothing really that's like, there's no blueprint for that, unfortunately. My story is very different than Ross's story. Our stories is way different than how Bree got into recreational sports. But I obviously want to bring up everything that we talked about a little bit before about the NIRSA Assembly and how to apply and everything like that. Just for the simple fact that you can go onto this website, onto the NIRSA website, and actually talk and look and see what we're actually doing, what the makeup is, how to get involved, which is also very important, and then how to apply. Applications don't open until February, but that's because we do a full year from I want to say April all the way through June 1st, I think is when we roll off. But obviously we can go through and have these discussions, and you can apply as many times as you want. If you want to continue working on a yearly basis with the NIRSA Assembly, that's something that I highly encourage. And like I said, NIRSA Assembly is one of the committees that actually, and work committee/work teams that has a pretty good composition of students on it. And we're always looking to have more students come and fill those roles, especially if you want to get into the field of recreation. And on the other side of the spectrum, if you're feeling like, whoa, this is a lot of information, I don't know if I can handle these conversations, or I would feel out of place, please don't. It's definitely one of these things where we have open dialogue. Typically our meetings are an hour to an hour and a half. They're very directed. We have breakout sessions and we talk about things, and there's no wrong answer, because we're really just like it says, we're the think tank for NIRSA. So we're talking about issues but we're also bringing ideas to the table to see how we can resolve these issues. So it's definitely something, like I said, that I want to make sure that everyone actually takes the opportunity to actually look and apply for it when the applications do open. And I think I want to say that's all of our slides. Let me see if I can unshare. And I just want to open up the floor to see if anyone has like any questions or anything. I know that we went over a lot of information, but myself and Bree, you can find our contact information on the NIRSA Assembly page, as well as if you have any questions. Let's see, Ross. Oh, that was a long time ago. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I could also drop my email into the chat as well. I like to think of these opportunities with volunteering with NIRSA as continuous personal development. It's always something good to just add to your resume or just add to your roster of skills when you are continuing. And, you know, maybe recreation doesn't turn out to be a field that you want to work in, but these experiences, these conversations, they're definitely applicable to multi areas. So I really do believe that going out of your way and participating in something like this will definitely help you in the long run. So it's worth taking a look at, I think, to see what is offered and what you can also bring to the table.
And I also think that Ross brought up a great point, is that it just because you don't feel like going into it, it's good to test out the waters. Like I tell people, going to be a graduate assistant, if you're thinking about that, or even going into the field as a young professional, those 2 years as a graduate assistant will make or break whether you like rec sports or don't like it. But like I said, our stories can be very different. I know that there's some people that they got in it very late and they didn't go the GA route, or the traditional route, as some people say. But that's something that I want to make sure that y'all understand. There's no perfect way on how to get into rec sports. So Jen says, thanks. 15, this is the first time I've seen a presentation on what the NIRSA Assembly is. Well, I'm glad, Jen, that we could do that for you. And if you have any question, obviously just, give us a shout out. Piece of information that can pass on.
Jen, it's not to say that you feel bad or anything. I'm sure you don't, but I was going to say don't feel bad because I was kind of just dragged into the assembly. I didn't even know it existed. And somebody kind of extended that friendly hand and that warm welcome to say, hey, I think you would be great to serve here. What do you think about it? And that was the first time that I knew of the assembly as well. And so we're all learning. That's why I said it's so important that you all are here today. And I think you're very fortunate in that regard. So please take advantage of all of this so we can continue to move the profession forward.
Sweet. Are there any any questions that anyone has or anything that they want to know? Random facts. My favorite quarterback is Russell Wilson.
I got a random fact. Let's see if anybody loves hip hop or rap. Kendrick Lamar. I've met Kendrick Lamar on 3 different occasions and had multiple conversations with him. He's awesome. He's great.
What? Bailey knows what's up. Anyways.
So cool.
All right. And so, Ross, we don't have anything else. I'm glad I got the chat going, though. We got a couple responses because of the best quarterback in the NFL, but.
All right. Well, if there's any questions, say them now or ever hold your peace. If not, well, I just want to thank Matt and Brianna for coming on and sharing this with us. And this whole presentation was an amazing experience. And I just want to thank you for all of that. Big emoji round of applause.
Thank you. I want to answer that question about the mentor program really quickly. Leora, is it Leora, right? If I remember correctly. All right, sweet. So the mentor program is actually one of the facets within the NIRSA member network. It was created a long time ago to kind of connect professionals like myself or Bree or Ross to students that we most likely wouldn't see or meet. But you basically fill out this form that's on the NIRSA website. I'll have Ross, boom, that one. Brianna's got. I told you, see, look at Bree doing all the good things. And if you fill that out, you basically get connected to someone that's not like-minded, but has some of the same interests as you. And then some of the things that I used to do with some of the mentees that I had, I would send them like maybe articles to read. Like the NIRSA 21-day challenge would be like if I had a couple of mentees, if I was part of this program, would be the NIRSA 21-day challenge. Just kind of sitting down with them, talking about them, and go from there. And it's definitely something that's cool because then I get to go see those people at conferences in person in the past. But now it's one of those things that it's definitely something that I think is beneficial because you get to send them like resumes and things like that. I do a small thing with some of my mentees that I still have from the mentor program. If they're going for jobs, I'll do like Zoom calls with them for interviews, practices, phone interview practice, and then I'll row Bree or someone like Bree or Ross and be like, hey, can you guys jump on this call with my students? And that way to get a little bit more perspective about interview processes, roles, resumes, how to bargain when you're a GA, even though you can't really bargain your pay for a GA. But then also when you get to the point where you want to look for a position in recreational sports, what to expect as far as like salary, how does that relate to me living in California, Bree living in Colorado, like what's the difference, the pay difference, like what can I expect and all that stuff. So those are some of the things that I kind of went over with my mentees in the past, but I definitely recommend the mentor program. It's been around for a long time. I want to say a couple years before I started. So that's kind of how I also got involved with NIRSA. Sorry, just want to answer a question before we left. All right, any other questions or anything like that? That was a great question. Yeah, no problem. Sweet. All right, Ross, I think that we're good now.
All right, awesome then. So thank you everyone for coming out to all the different presentations today. And we'll be excited to see you again tomorrow morning.
Bye guys, have a good one.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you. Ross, I want to ask this